And I am live. Greetings, everyone. It's Gordy Canuck, and you are watching Act One, which stands for A Canadian Take on News Events. Today is the 14th of September, Sunday, the 14th of September, 2025. We're right now just after 10:20 p.m. I'm a little late starting the live stream. I had it scheduled for 10:15, but as I often say, life is busy. My streams, I often am a little behind when I said I would start. Darnielle Pistachio is already here, saying hello, hello, hello back. Whether you're watching this live or if you're watching on replay, I always appreciate knowing where people are chiming in from. And I have Daniel ask me if I'm wearing a Rider jersey. If you're an American, you might not know that he's referring to the Rough Riders. This is actually a Green Bay Packer shirt, although it doesn't have anything that would indicate that it doesn't say Green Bay on it. It has a player's name on the back. This was a gift. It was given to me. I'm not big on merch. It's not part of my persona. I have a lot of apparel, though, that was given to me, and I am Scottish. I am cheap. So if someone's going to give me something for free, whether it's branded or not, if anything, this most closely resembles the colors of the Edmonton Elks, formerly known as the Edmonton Eskimos of the Canadian Football League. Um, a Rider jersey, that would be the Saskatchewan Roughriders, and they have a different color green. They have a more, I don't know what you call it, Kelly green, lime green, and not well, yeah, lime green. And for Doubloons is here from New Jersey. He's from my old stomping grounds, whether you're aware of it or not, for Doubloons. But I spent 5+ years living in Bergen County. Lived 1 year in the town of Wyckoff and then 4 years in the town of Glenrock, which is right across the Hudson River from New York City. My dad used to work in New York City and used to take a train into Pennsylvania Station. So there we go. And Darnell's writing that my Eskimos got socially redistributed, so I quit watching football. Darnell is from Alberta, Canada, which is in the news big time right now over this notion of Wexit, this notion of Western Canada, primarily Alberta, but it could also include Saskatchewan, maybe Manitoba and BC as well, as there being a separatist movement in Western Canada looking to either separate and form an independent Western Canadian political entity, separate nation, separating from Canada as we know it today, or conversely, possibly even joining the United States. And My Other's Keeper has shown up, and I know that My Other's Keeper is from the great state of Saskatchewan, or great state, I don't, faux pas, mistake, great province of Saskatchewan. I have Wexit on my mind. And For Doubloons is asking me whether or not I think history repeats itself, and it does. History does repeat it. And My Other's Keeper is my friend from out in Saskatchewan is vehemently opposed. She's a very proud Canadian. And so, no to joining the US. And I think my own personal take is that while the sentiment toward separating from the rest of Canada it's significant, I don't think it's anywhere near approaching a majority. Just talking on the political front, I think it might punch in and around 33, 34, somewhere around there, might be somewhere around a third of the voting public, but I don't think it's anywhere near to getting to 50% plus one. And Darnell saying, good old Saskatchewan, laughing my rear end off. And My Other's Keeper echoes that, LOL. At any rate, what I want to talk about tonight, the topic of tonight's video, is fascism. And it's a word that gets thrown around a lot. Whenever someone disagrees with another's point of view or a political stance or political affiliation or about a specific issue, it's quite common, I find, for this label of, well, you're a fascist to get thrown around. And I thought it would be instructive to look at what is the definition of fascism, because I had a university professor, still remember his name, Dr. Whitaker. We never got in a first name basis, this gentleman and I, but Dr. Whitaker was always big on defining your terms. Because we use words quite often and they have a meaning for us, but that meaning may not be universally shared. And when you talk about fascism, I would imagine that there are different conceptualizations about what a fascist is and what fascism means. Um, and you see this all the time with Dr. Jordan Peterson. He'll be interviewed and asked if he's a Christian. Well, the problem is that term Christian means different things to different people. For some, they will say that to call yourself a Christian means that you have to affirm Jesus's death and resurrection, his death and resurrection, his death on the cross and his resurrection 3 days later. And if you don't believe that, you're not a Christian. But I know that there are individuals who identify themselves as Christians, but who question the resurrection, who do not believe it. They think, there are varying degrees. So it's important to define things if we're going to talk about them. And once again, I invite you to fill up the live chat, as Four Doubloons have done, as My Other's Keeper has done, as Darnell Pistachio did. If you can let me know where you're from, if you're new, if you're just chiming in here for the first time, let me know where you're chiming in from. I love having Americans, Canadians, Europeans. I've had people from Australia, from Netherlands, from all corners of Canada, all corners of the US come on, from Texas, from Wyoming, from Florida. So fill it up. And likewise, if you want to join me on the live chat, if you wanted to, if something jumps out at you, I'm highlighting the link right now, the comment, and I'll star it. But if you're want to come on and have a discussion about things, or a debate, if you like, I want to keep things friendly. You're welcome to click that link. You'll go backstage, and then I will add you to the stage. I simply ask that you have, it's not a requirement, but it would be nice for you to have a camera, because communication isn't the greatest over the internet, Zoom style or StreamYard, what I'm using right now. It's not the best. The best form of communication happens face to face, but absent being in person face to face, it helps to have a camera, because then we can get visual cues. Sometimes I don't hear something very well, and I can kind of tug at my ear to let you know I didn't hear you, that sort of thing. At any rate, and I like what My Other's Keeper is writing. I'm in my living room. Very good. At any rate, so what does fascism mean? And what I've done is I brought up what Merriam-Webster, popular dictionary. I mean, I could have gone with Oxford, but Merriam-Webster is the first one to come up. And so I thought I'd share their definition. This is what Merriam-Webster says. And here's what it says. It says often. I find that curious. So, I think they're even acknowledging that there are different concepts of what fascism is, but often what it's described as is a populist political philosophy, movement, or regime, such as that of the fascisti, which I guess was, I think, an Italian outcropping of fascism, that exalts nation and often race above the individual, that is associated with a centralized autocratic government headed by a dictatorial leader. So antithetical to democracy, where in democracy, there's supposed to be rigorous debate in the public square, in our legislatures, issues are debated, and then, hopefully a consensus is achieved. Typically, often what happens is that nobody's happy. Sometimes I think the best situation is where you have two opposing sides and neither extreme is happy with the ultimate decision. That means you're probably close to getting it right. And then, so with the centralized autocratic government headed by a dictatorial leader, and that is characterized by severe economic and social regimentation, and by and this to me is the key, and by forcible support. The core of fascism is loyalty to tribe, ethnic identity, religion, tradition, according to someone by the name of Jason Stanley. And full disclosure, I don't know who Jason Stanley is. And then it goes on to quote someone by the name of Josh Jones. There are differences between Italian fascism, German fascism, and their various national descendants. Um, so strikes me that in reading that definition, it does more to cloud the waters than to muddies the waters rather than clearing things up. But when I look and I see populist political philosophy, and sadly, Charlie Kirk, it often applies to President Donald Trump in the United States, and to those who espouse a MAGA type identity, make America great again. And reading this guy affix the label, a populist political philosophy, movement, or regime that exalts nation and often race. And you see it all the time at Trump rallies, chants of USA, 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 elbows up, Canada first. We're going to hit you back hard. It reared its head here, too. Um, this idea of it almost breaks down into a identity politics. Danny has shown up. Danny's Montrealer. I think seems to be looking a bit now. Let me stop sharing the screen if I can. And it looks like it's stopped sharing. Sorry about the slow technical quality of my podcast. It's just that I'm in rural southeastern Ontario. I don't have the most robust internet connection, and I don't want to share videos anymore. I figure maybe a screen capture I can share, but not much more than that. And I wanted to get on to this label fascism that gets thrown around. And for me, the most poignant part of that definition is the suppression of opposing viewpoints. And it strikes me that this is where, when we look at an individual such as Charlie Kirk and those of his ilk, that both sides, we've become so polarized in the United States and in my own native Canada, that there seems to be in both camps elements that want to suppress the thoughts, views, ideas, opinions of the opposing camp. There's this belief that, let's take a look at Charlie Kirk may very well, it's looking like there's a strong possibility that the motivating factor behind this kid, Tyler Robinson, who is the one accused of pulling the trigger. And there are strong suggestions that if he did indeed do it, that a primary motivating factor was Charlie Kirk's views on the whole transgender debate. And that, and Tyler Robinson, apparently the reporting is that um, on the one of the shell casings was written, "Hey fascist, patch this." So it we've got to wait for the trial to come out. We got to wait for all the facts to be presented, but it's impossible not to engage in a little bit of speculation based on what we know so far. And if in fact this bears out, it would appear that Tyler Robinson, the shooter, that he viewed Charlie Kirk as a fascist. So how do you square uh, someone trying to combat fascism by engaging in fascist machinations? There's nothing more fascist in my mind. How better to silence the opposing view than with a weapon? And I have 4 doubloons from New Jersey saying the "Hey Fascist Catch This" is a reference from the game Hell Divers. I'm not a gamer, so I'm not familiar with that game whatsoever. However, that may, I'll take you at your word that this is a phrase that is linked to a particular game called Hell Divers, but why would you take a slogan from a game like and put it into onto a shell casing that's going to be involved in the shooting of an individual unless you believe it is applicable to that situation? And again, there's I have a problem with calling someone like Charlie Kirk a fascist, someone who's willing to go into the enemy camp, is willing to go into these liberal arts schools where transgender ideology is promoted and to debate it openly, you know, in the public square. Let's go at it. Let's have an open discussion. The fascist response would be to incarcerate anyone holding a view contrary to your own, or to do what it appears that Tyler Robinson did, if he is indeed guilty. Um, Again, I don't want to make this video about Charlie Kirk. I've already done 3. That's enough. I see Whale Oil Beef has also showed up. He's out in British Columbia. So Canadians are very well represented on tonight's live stream. I've got Montreal, Saskatchewan, Alberta, BC. I've got New Jersey. Start talking. But I haven't talked that way since I was in grade 4. So, but what are your thoughts? My thoughts are that we are at a dangerous inflection point. I was watching Clayton, whatever his name is, on Redacted, and he kept using the word tipping point, inflection point, tipping point, and it's where the extremist elements in 2 different camps are so entrenched in their viewpoint and so entrenched in their view that they are absolutely 100% right and on the side of goodness and virtue, and the other side is on the side of evil and whatever the opposite of evil and satanic whatever. We've got these 2 opposing camps who have basically taken all the humanity out of the opposing side. And again, this applies on both sides of the equation. And I think the biggest thing we have to do to lower the temperature is to recognize the humanity of those who hold views which oppose our own. My views on the whole transgender debate should be well known by this point. Anyone who's watched any of my videos, I bring it up frequently. I was pretty much lockstep with what Charlie Kirk would espouse during his little, debate me, prove me wrong events taking place at places like that university in Utah. He did this all over the country. And my views are pretty much lockstep with his own, that there are two genders. We have male and we have female, and that this and primarily the big issue comes with men who want to be identified as women, who present as women and but it's not just enough to want to be, pronouns and everything else, but then, they want access to female designated spaces because in their view, I am, one of these individuals will say, I am a woman, so I should be allowed into female designated spaces. I should be allowed to compete against women in sports because I am a woman, even though biologically, their chromosomes don't line up with their inward feeling. And I'm lockstep with Charlie Kirk's view that gender's binary and that men, if you're XY, that you should not be given access to female only designated spaces, that you should not be competing in the sporting arena against women. I don't even like using the term biological woman. It makes it sound like there are different kinds of women. And I don't even like using these terms, biological man, biological woman. There are men and there are women. The biology is understood. Men have a penis and testicles. Women have breasts and a vagina and ovaries. Come on. But what I have to caution myself against is I have to remind myself that just because someone is espousing this ideology that says gender is strictly based on one's inner subjective feelings, and if you feel like a woman, you are a woman, someone espousing that point of view, I have to remind myself they're not evil. I may not like their idea, but the individual expressing the idea, they have a right to express their opinion in the public square. And that it is quite likely, and in fact, probable, overwhelmingly, that individuals expressing this view are doing it because they believe they have a good heart. They want the best possible outcomes. I want the best for the world. And I think that the way to achieve the best for the world is for the world to recognize that gender is a societal construct, and that rather than being based on things like chromosomes and genitalia, that it should be based on one's inner subjective feelings. And individuals espousing this, they believe quite overwhelmingly that this is the best way to achieve, an ideal society, is the best way to, get rid of a lot of the problems in the world. And even though I disagree with their idea and I disagree with their conclusion that it'll make things better, I think it makes things worse, but we need to discuss it. And there are individuals who share my point of view who are equally wanting to shut down the opposition, not allow them to talk, violently oppose their ability to engage in the public square. Let me, and I have Four Doubloons is writing. To be fair, Charlie Kirk did have a lot of opinions that people could consider fascist. Well, he was definitely America first, make America great again. I don't know his views on a lot of things. I was not a big follower of Charlie Kirk. He's impossible in the culture wars that are going on right now. He was a polarizing figure and pretty much impossible to avoid. Comedy Central, with their show South Park, parodied him brilliantly, by the way. They did it. The Cartman's impression of Charlie Kirk in these debates was masterful, and South Park is so quick, sharp-witted. The writing is so so good. Uh, they had Cartman was a master debater. And the play on words, I think, should be obvious. I won't spell it out plainly, but he's in the bathroom on his camera, and his mother's knocking on the door. Eric, you've been in the bathroom a long time. What are you doing? Leave me alone, Mom. I, I'm talking to college girls. I'm master debating. And it's like, get out of there now, Cartman. It was funny. What, and I can acknowledge that, recognizing that, my views largely, for the most part, line up with those of Charlie Kirk. But I don't know that there is a solution to this problem, because my fear, I think things are so bad right now that people are so firmly entrenched in their echo chambers that the possibility of bridging this divide and getting people, talking and being open and discussing things, I genuinely do not think it's possible. I think we've crossed the proverbial Rubicon and we've gone too far. And that, let's look at another issue, immigration. There was a group, and I don't know what they're called. I shared it on my Facebook timeline, but there was a march and a rally in Toronto, and I think it was a Canada First rally, and I can see, and they marched with Canadian flags, some of them flying upside down, which, being a military veteran, I disagree with that vehemently. I do not like seeing people fly the Canadian flag upside down, and that's because of my military background. I know what the flying the flag upside down means. It signals surrender. We've lost. It signals defeat, and I do not like seeing my flag, the Canadian flag, flown upside down as a signal of defeat. That bothers me. Now, would I want it to be prohibited, that no one is allowed to fly the flag upside down? No, because I believe in free speech. I believe in freedom of expression. And even though I disagree with that expression, and I will talk about the reasons why I disagree with it, I would not want an individual to be prohibited. I wouldn't want them to be prosecuted for the crime. I wouldn't want flying the flag upside down to be a crime. Would I like everyone to wear a poppy? Yes, I would, on November 11th, on Remembrance Day. I think remembering the fallen is important. Would I want a law made requiring, mandating, making it an offense of some description to not wear a poppy? No. And likewise, I'm not a fan of individuals who have altered the poppy, and they've tried to piggyback other agendas onto it. Some have started to put the rainbow colors in the poppy, or they've made a white poppy, and I don't like that either. But freedom of expression is freedom of expression. I don't have to like it. I can be offended by it. But suck it up, Buttercup. Famous, you'd hear that in the military all the time. Go fill out a hurt feelings report. Uh, so I like what Ford Doubloons is writing. To be fair, Charlie Kirk did have a lot of opinions that people could, and this is important. A conditional word would be considered fascist, because people will look at that and say he's very nationalistic. He's very, very America first, and that's one of the attributes associated with fascist ideology. So fair enough. But for me personally, this is why I talk about defining your terms. For me, the key and the most important element to fascism is the trying to silence, suppress, and nothing silences more than a bullet, but trying to silence and suppress those you don't want to let others express their view openly, freely in the public square, in the ecclesia, biblical word from I forget which gospel it's in. It might be in Matthew. Well, it's in Matthew, Mark, or Luke, where Jesus famously says, your name is Peter, but I'm going to call you Rock. Your name is Simon, but I'm going to call you Peter, which is the Greek word Petros, rock, because on this rock I will build my, and the word gets translated in English as church, but the original Greek word is ecclesia, which can equally be translated and more accurately translated, in my opinion, as the public square. I believe that Christian voices that we are called to be in the public square. We're not to be go running into our churches, closing the doors clandestinely. No, we're to be out in the public square. And now we get into trouble again because there are individuals who do not believe that the public square is the place that religion belongs behind a closed door on a Sunday. And if you want to engage with it, you are to, if I want to hear a religious message, I'll go to your church, but don't bring it into the public square. But Jesus said, on this church, on this ecclesia, on this public square, I will build my public square. On this rock I will build my ecclesia. On this rock I will build my public square. I'm going to read on what's being written, and no one's asking to join in yet. If anyone wants to come on to the live stream, you're welcome. I've also set up a little thing on tonight's video called Super Chats. And I'm not big on the YouTube thing. I'm not very skilled at it. I'm not the most technologically adept individual in the world. I've passed my 59th birthday, so I'm in my 60th year. I was born in 1966. I can navigate technology well enough to have a YouTube station, but the finer points of things, I don't know them. I often say this is, a very raw, bare bones, basic YouTube channel, no bells and whistles, miserable, pathetic little YouTube station. Those are other words I use. And I like it that way because I hope it speaks to a degree of authenticity and that there are no strings behind my back, that I'm not, controlled by anyone or anything. The only thing I want to be controlled by is by my faith in Jesus Christ. I want Christ to be Lord. But anyway, let me read what's being said by four doubloons down in New Jersey. But of course, assassination is deeply wrong. Tyler was most likely a terminally online kid who got indoctrinated from an extremist side of the internet. And that's unfortunately what happens. And this is what I check myself against, because Charlie Kirk, I agree with him on a lot of things. So why would I engage with his content? That's kind of boring. I don't want to be in an echo chamber. Instead, I'll engage with the Young Turks. Instead, I'll engage with Al Jazeera, and I'll try to engage with content that challenges my point of view rather than confirming it. And that's what's needed in this world. But unfortunately, I think what we're seeing is that people are getting entrenched. They're going into their little echo chambers. And I see this in the political framework all the time. I see this in politics all the time, where I talk to a candidate from the PPC party, People's Party of Canada, and they tell me, oh, I'm going to win the election. I've got this. I've been going door to door. And, oh, everyone really loves my message. This is, I'm going to romp. They're in for a big surprise come election day, and then the votes get cast and they get 1.5%, or maybe if they're a good candidate they get 7 or 8% of the vote, but they tank and they don't understand it. Everyone I talk to, well, people are sometimes polite at the door. They don't want to engage. They don't follow politics that closely. And this PPC candidate, has facts that he's ready to spew out like a machine gun. So they just go along. But then they go behind the cardboard cutout and they mark down liberal, conservative, or NDP and never give a thought to voting PPC. And so there's a tendency, people get stuck in their echo chamber. And so they think that the views that they're hearing coming back, that these are universally held views. I saw it in spades during our most recent April 28th election. I had so many friends who were convinced that there was no way Mark Carney could win. No way, because everyone I talked to, and because I get out of my echo chamber, and in fact, I actively seek to avoid it, I was one of the few voices, and I don't know, maybe the only, I don't know, But I was saying is recently, January, February, I was saying if Mark Carney gets the leadership, look out. I said, look out. I believed at the time, I said, I think he could knock the conservatives down to a minority and maybe even win a minority mandate himself. And lo and behold, he did even better than I thought he could, but no one thought he could do as well as when I would express that opinion in January, February, March. People were like, "No way, no way, there's no way Canadians will go back to the Liberals. No way. Doesn't matter who the leader is. There's no way." And then then they default and they go, well, it must be rigged. It had to be rigged because everyone I know, but we need to get out of our echo chambers and we need to start engaging with those with whom we disagree. Um, I wrote down one little thing on here, just a little note to myself, and it's that you become what you profess to hate. This kid, Tyler Robinson, uh, who seems to have had a hate on for fascism, the game reference notwithstanding. We see this group Antifa. Antifa stands for anti-fascism, and yet so many of the tactics that they employ are fascism 101. I've spoken about it on this channel before, sometime 2018, 2019. Maxime Bernier was doing a sit down little conference, little discussion event at Mohawk College in Hamilton. And it was being hosted by David Rubin of the Rubin Report, an American political commentator who's considered to be on the right of the political spectrum. And so individuals, they packed an auditorium at Mohawk College in Hamilton, and people came and they were going to the event, walking up to the event, and there were self-identified members of this Antifa crowd. They were wearing balaclavas before COVID, 2018-19. They're wearing balaclavas covering their faces, and they were there trying to suppress and intimidate and prevent people from going to hear Maxime Bernier have this little talk with David Rubin. And what they were screaming on the street was fascist scum off our streets, fascist scum off our streets. So they believe that David Rubin and Maxime Bernier are fascists. And so to stop fascists, they employ fascist tactics to try and, fighting fire with fire. And all you end up with is more fire. You try to beat fascism with fascism, all we get is more fascism. And I almost wonder, there's a part of me, I have a conspiratorial bent, mea culpa, I'm guilty. I don't think 9/11, I don't think the official narrative is true. I don't think Lee Harvey Oswald acted on his own. I think there were definitely some nefarious things going on during the whole COVID era. I think there was I classify that as a black op or a psyops, psychological operation. I have a conspiratorial bent. And it strikes me that events such as what just happened in Utah and this widening political divide between the left and the right, that is it by design? Is it to get us fighting to such a degree so that authoritarian dictatorial style control is put forward as being necessary? If we're going to keep everyone safe, we have to do this because democracy doesn't work anymore. The left and the right, you guys are both employing fascism. You're both trying to kill each other. So we're done. We're forget freedom of speech. It's not allowed. The government's going to tell you what you're allowed to say, what you're allowed to think, what you're allowed to believe, what opinions you're allowed to hold, and that's the end of it, and we will have peace. And I think there's an element of the population that's all they care about. They just want peace. They're not strongly politically aligned. They just go along. They go along to get along. And so whatever the government says, and I think we saw that in spades in the COVID era. A lot of people, they didn't want to look into, and examine and question the mandates and the narratives that were out. They just want to sit down, watch the news, be told what to think, what to believe, how to feel about things. Bob's your uncle, good. I've got my marching orders, and they don't want to engage intellectually with anything. They just want to go along to get along. And the master is the television. Anyway, uh, so what did get back to Doubloon, what he wrote, but of course, assassination is deeply wrong. Tyler was most likely terminally online kid who got indoctrinated. Yeah, I think I've beaten that to death. Eat Me has shown up from Montreal as well, otherwise known as Nancy. And Four Doubloons is filling it up. Trans people have already been targeted from the state, with politicians using them as scapegoats for any problems. This can cause danger to their lives. And that's fair enough. And I think that's something we have to recognize. There has to be compassion on the right, and recognize, my views notwithstanding. Have I known trans individuals? Yes, more than I had thought about. Years ago, probably going back 20 odd years ago, I knew a man who was transitioning. He was doing the full Monty. And when I knew him, he was, presenting, dressing in female attire. I would assume he had implants, or he was wearing falsies, but I think he was probably having implants. He looked to be going the full Monty. It's one individual. I've worked with two individuals recently. I left the Army in June of 2021. For the last couple of years, I've been working in a retail environment with a lot of young people. Um, and I've worked with two individuals who, female, but who identify either as male or non-binary. As one of them was wearing, beautiful young woman, and she was wearing a little symbol on her, a necklace, a little pendant of some description, and to me it was reminiscent of Pink Floyd's The Wall album. And I said, "What's that? That's, is that a rock band? I've never seen that symbol before." And she goes, "Oh, this is for non-binary people. I'm non-binary." And now, was I mad, angry, upset? Sad that this kid, young kid, she was probably grade 9 or 10, that she's suffering from what I refer to as gender confusion. I have empathy for her. And I never, in conversation with her, I simply would use her name. Would not use, I would avoid using any language that I just played it down the middle. I didn't go along with the nonsense. I didn't use they, there, and but I did. And you can do it. It's not too hard when you're now. If I was talking to someone else about her, I would say, "Well, I was talking to her about this," and I had people say to me, "Well, she that so and so does not identify as female." I said, "I don't care. She's, in my world, she's a girl." But I wouldn't say that. It never happened where she was in earshot. Uh, so Four Doubloons goes on to write, "No matter your opinion on trans people, the right has been demonizing them for so long, calling them pedophiles and other heinous stuff." Yeah, it's so funny, and I've spoken about this on the channel before. My age, being born 1966, I've kind of grown up with this transition that we've experienced in the broader culture over the last 40, 50 years. And uh, and this transcends both Canada and the US, because I spent 10 years growing up in your United States, New York, New Jersey, and Portland, Oregon. But most of my life I've been, Canadian. But it transcends the border. And as I was coming into the world in 1966, um, the whole notion of gender identity and all this stuff, what was only just beginning. sex and gender and all these issues were private. They were not for the public square. Yeah, sex was to be still at that time. Sex was to be an activity engaged in between a married couple, a man and a woman, and you weren't supposed to talk about it. Um, and pornography, yes, pornography was around. Pornography has always been around. It goes back to ancient times. But if you wanted a Playboy magazine, a Hustler, a Penthouse, whatever the case, they were available, but they were behind the counter and you had to be over 18. You would have to go and see the shop owner and say, I want a Penthouse, I want a whatever. And then you would have to either be demonstrably at least 18 years of age or show proof of such and etc. Um, and there were, we call it porno movies now, or now with the internet, not everything's available 24/7. But there were pornographic movies, and famous little story when we lived in Staten Island, New York. Famous little story in my family is what happened is it's a bit long-winded, but it's a fun story regardless. We lived on Kelvin Avenue in Staten Island, New York, and we moved there in late '66, early '67, just as Staten Island was opening up to residential development. Prior to that, it had been a place for warehousing. In fact, yeah, it was an industrial area. It wasn't a residential area. But in the mid '60s, they started to build housing in Staten Island, and we moved in to pretty much smack dab in the middle of Staten Island, Kelvin Avenue. And what happened is as they built, they started in the middle and they built out toward the ends. It's not a round island, it's long and thin. So they started in the middle and they started building outward, and they left the storm sewers open. And so what happened is there were sewer rats. When I was a kid growing up, I don't remember it. I was too young. We moved when I was three and a half. So it was understood on our little cul-de-sac. We lived on a little dead-end street. Calvin Avenue at that time was dead end. And it was understood that if you saw a rat and you were afraid, you just ran into whatever house. No questions asked. Just run in. And as it so happened, my mom was out one day and she saw a rat cross, close proximity to her as she was coming back from someone's house. And so she screamed and ran to the first door that belonged to Rocco Vottinelli. I doubt he's alive anymore. And Rocco worked at Con Edison at the power company. Like in Ontario, we call it Ontario Hydro. In New York, it's called Con Edison. And so my mom went running and screaming into Rocco's house. And Rocco worked the night shift at Con Ed. He was part of the cleaning crew. And she opened the door, screams, runs in. And what did she find herself confronted with? Rocco was there with 4 or 5 of his coworkers, and they were showing what was called in the day a stag film, a pornographic movie, and they were playing poker. And my mom was like, "Oh my God, what's worse, this or the rats?" My mom had been raised, well, my mom was a PK, a pastor's kid, who had grown up in Winnipeg and Ottawa. And now she's living in New York City, in her 20s. And she's confronted with Rocco and his poker playing buddies who work the night shift at Con Ed, playing poker and watching pornographic movies. But it's a long diversion to say that sexuality has been moving further and further and further into the public square. And to a degree, I can understand the homosexual community wanting their lifestyle celebrated by the culture, because we started celebrating we started sexualizing everything on television. Every episode of every show is who's sleeping with who. Look at Two and a Half Men, kind of the apex of our descent into debauchery and to elevating it and celebrating it. Well, if you're going to elevate and celebrate Charlie Harper and his, and before him it was Sam Malone. Before him it was Hawkeye Pierce. This venerating the Lothario, bedding as many women as he can. Why can't homosexuals do likewise? If we're going to put it out there in the public square, decadent behavior, well, why should we limit it to heterosexual decadence? Why not include homosexual decadence? Anyway, Whale has something to say. Democracy requires free and independent media, public debate on important societal issues. We don't have that. So I've added have. He wrote, we don't that. I think he meant to put, we don't have that. No, in Canada, what we have is the CBC News, which is government owned and operated. And so what you get from the CBC News is the government narrative. And the Canadian government is all in on the transgender stuff, that this idea that, your gender is based on subjective feelings and not objective biological reality. Whatever you feel is what you are. And our government is all in on this, and their media mouthpiece, the CBC, as well. However, now people will say, well, yeah, but then you've got Global and you got CTV. Well, Global and CTV are not viable. They don't make enough money to survive. They're bleeding red ink. Their balance sheet is bleeding red ink. So the Canadian government has stepped up and they fund the CTVs and the Globals and other traditional mainstream legacy media. They fund them collectively to the tune of somewhere around 300 to 400 million a year, so that CTV and Global can remain in operation, and publications like the Globe and Mail, Toronto Star, so that they can, print. That they can, and there's that old bromide, you don't bite the hand that feeds you. And so it has become pervasive in the culture because you see it on TV, you hear it from government agencies say that, you can identify however you want. And if you disagree with this, well, then they label you. They call you a fascist. They call you transphobic. You have a mental phobia. You have a mental illness if you don't go along with what the authorities, what the state says. If you disagree with what the state says, well, we are going to marginalize you. And maybe at some point we may have to take away some of your liberties. You wanted bodily autonomy. You wanted to object to taking an injection of a substance. And you wanted your body, your choice. That doesn't exist in fascism. In fascism, the state will tell you what you must put into your body, whether you like it or not. This is the world we're slipping into. And Amy's saying that my super chat function isn't working. Just tested it. Well, thank you. Okay, so never mind the super chat stuff. What I wanted to do was try and maybe leverage, off, this free speech that's now everyone talking about free speech and open debate and saying, I'll host if I hit my super chat goal. I'll host, and you come on, let's go. I don't mind. Let's have open, hopefully reasonable discussion, but I tend to think of myself as center right. I don't consider myself extremist right, because and the reason I don't consider myself extremist right is because I do not want opposing viewpoints shut down and declared illegal. But I find there are those who share my right-wing views who go too far and want the opposition shut down. They don't want the opposition to have the access to the public square. Fighting fire with fire, this whole idea about becoming what you profess to hate. Let's see what Whale's saying. I remember the time when PH, let me read it here, when PH, Hust, oh, okay, Penthouse, Hustler, etc., were available for anyone to peruse in corner stores with just a sign that said no minors. Yeah, it went from behind the counter, high up, you'd have to ask, to later making its way into the magazine rack, but it would be usually typically on the top shelf. And it would say no minors. And now, of course, forget it. We have the internet. Anyone can access anything they want all the time. Um, and then Eat Me is writing, Nancy's writing, watching CBC feels like being rapiered mentally. I think a rapier is a sword, but I think that's a play on words. I don't watch the CBC News. I don't watch television. I've covered that before on here. It's been uh, even in my younger years, when I was in my 20s, got my first apartment downtown Toronto. People were amazed when I didn't have a television in my apartment. They're like, "Where's your TV?" So I don't have one, and it was by choice. But people assumed it was simply because I couldn't afford a television. I had people throwing them at me. I have a TV down in my basement. I'm not using. You can have it. I got one in the garage. I'm not using. You can have it. Yeah. Anyway, and Nancy saying that it's both a play on that other word that I'm not going to use and being stabbed, which leave that alone. At any rate, anyone have any final thoughts on the matter? I've come up on nearly an hour. I figure that's long enough for a Sunday night. Uh, it's an unfortunate world that we're in. I think it's going to get worse. I think it's going to get worse. I think what we saw last week in Utah. Uh, I think we're going to see more. I think we're going to see more. There have even been Canadians celebrating what happened. Uh, there's news of a Toronto University of Toronto associate professor, I believe, in the humanities. I actually did a little reading on her just to see. I went to Rate Your Prof. There's a website where you can rate your prof. They also have Rate Your Teacher for high school kids, and you can go and kids who are trying to determine when you're at U of T, York, whatever university you go to, you might want to, before signing up for a course, one of students will go and check out how does this professor, what is their grading like, what are their lectures like, and she was across the, she had was the ratings on her were across the board, but she's been suspended, put on administrative leave by the University of Toronto, so she's not teaching classes right now because of comments she made in the wake of the what happened to Charlie Kirk. And she's defending herself, saying, no, she meant that more broadly against all fascists. Yeah. He just happens to be one of the people. Yeah. And it's like, and you're a university professor advocating what appears to be, extreme levels of action against those with viewpoints that oppose your own. And the difficulty is people are so convinced that they're right and that the other side is evil. If you don't go along with transgender ideology, if you don't go along with it, well, then you're a mean, evil, hateful person who deserves to be silenced because you don't agree with me. And I'm a good person. I'm a good person. So if you were a good person, you would be, you would agree with me. If you disagree with me, it means you're bad, you're evil, and you get what you deserved because you're evil. And bringing my Christian faith back into this, and that's always got to be the forefront. Is it speaks to the fall. Eve ate of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And now we think we can determine what's good and evil on our own. And of course, we always think we're the good guys and the other they're the bad guys, they're evil. And so, the ends justify the means. If they're evil, whatever ends are needed to eradicate evil can be justified. I can justify what happened to Charlie Kirk because he was evil in the eyes of some. I'm not saying that, but I'm trying to give voice to what some on the extreme left are thinking. And then Whale, what's he writing? there seems to be a mass awakening in the works regarding Charlie Kirk wakes and memorials, and they just had his, they had a memorial service for him, that there is a war in effect against freedom. And I spoke to this earlier. I don't think I went too deep into it, but this idea that it's almost like they're fanning the flames, pushing people are being pushed further and further into their echo chambers, and all that can happen out of that is is it's not good. The only end result can be something not good, where everyone's so far deep in their echo chamber that they're convinced that the opposing side is evil. Evil justifies, you know, nothing's off the table. It's evil. We have to eradicate it. It's that old question. If you'd been alive in 1930s Germany, would you have ended the Fuhrer's life? And yes, these young kids in their late teens, early 20s are attending post-secondary institutions. Oh yeah, I would. I would. I'm a good person. Uh, and what's Nancy writing? My final word is to rein in pundits, which passes journalists and return to objective journalism. Uh, and there's a difficult question. Are we do we promote free speech by reining in free speech? By the only thing is the dangerous thing we're in now, the dangerous world we're living in now is one where the tech giants, the government, uh, they get to determine what thoughts, views, opinions are allowed into the public square. And you see this on YouTube. We saw it in droves during the COVID era, where if you didn't if you dared to suggest that COVID came from a lab, well, that was suppressed. If you cited the Stanford study, which showed that COVID was spreading massively, 50, 80 times greater than what the testing was indicating, and that the reason most people weren't being tested is because they weren't getting sick. If you talked about that Stanford study, as two emergency care doctors in uh, Bakersfield, California did. One was Dr. Erickson, and they held a press conference citing specifically a University of Stanford study. Stanford, not talking, the chiropractic school of Tijuana, Mexico. We're talking about Stanford here, and they're talking about John Ioannidis, one of the world's leading, probably maybe the world's most cited epidemiologist. John Ioannidis, considered to be, he'd be the guy who'd be on CNN, BBC, CBC News in previous eras. But when he dared conduct a study that showed that COVID was nowhere, anywhere, not even in the same planetary system in terms of lethality that they were suggesting. He was suggesting that, this is being overblown beyond anything imaginable, and shut out, not allowed to talk. So, and that's the world that we live in now. If you have a view that runs counter to the narrative, I'm affirming biological reality in this video and saying that gender, male, female, it's based on your chromosomes. It's based on whether you are XY or XX. And it's as simple as that. I will note there, and I've done this before in other videos, but I feel it incumbent upon myself to reiterate this, that there is a condition called intersex that has nothing to do with the transgender debate. Intersex involves individuals who have, there's an anomaly in their chromosomes. There's some defect. and I've spoken at length about such a condition called Swyer syndrome, where the Y chromosome doesn't do its job. The child develops in utero, but their Y chromosome that they have doesn't do its job. And so when the child is born, comes out, and the doctor looks, the child presents visually as female. And they don't do genetic testing out of the womb. They hand the baby to the mother and they say, "You have a little girl, vagina girl, penis boy. No penis there. Here's your little girl. It's got a vagina." Okay. And the parents go home and they raise the child. They've been told they have a girl because gender is binary. You're either a boy or a girl. And they paint the room pink, and the girl plays with dolls, and she grows up. She's socialized as a girl. Maybe some male type traits will manifest as she's a girl, and they think, oh, she's a tomboy. But then what happens 12, 13, 14, whatever age, as the child enters puberty, the girl doesn't have a menstrual cycle. And what's the problem? Why not? And Swyer syndrome is typically diagnosed during puberty, and the child hasn't menstruated, so they take it to the they take the child to the doctor, and the doctor says, okay, you have a very rare condition, like, less than a tenth of a percent, like 0.00 whatever percent of the population, you have this condition called Swyer syndrome. Your Y chromosome didn't do its job, and so you don't have any ovaries. And if you don't have ovaries, you don't have any eggs. And if you don't have any eggs, you don't get a period. And instead of your ovaries, there's fatty tissue there that is very prone to malignancy, and we need to deal with this. We need to remove the fatty tissue so you don't develop a cancer. And that is completely removed. That happens. This intersects, less than a tenth of a percent. It's very rare, 1 in 10,000 people, but it happens. But that's not transgender. Transgender is someone who is XY male, but and the chromosomes are normal, but I feel like I was born in the wrong body. I feel like a woman. Now, I have no problem acknowledging that the personality is a spectrum. Gender is binary. Gender is male and female, but personality, there are endless points on the spectrum, and society-wise, we have traits that we assign and perceive to be either masculine or feminine traits. If someone is aggressive, that is deemed a masculine trait. If someone is deemed to be more conciliatory, that is viewed as a feminine trait. Now, does that mean that a man cannot be conciliatory? Of course not. He can be very conciliatory. He can be not very aggressive. There are lots of guys who are not very aggressive. They're kind of low on that end of the spectrum of their personality, but it doesn't change their gender. And just putting on a dress and other accessories and, to present yourself as a female doesn't make you one any more than putting a sombrero and a big, cheesy mustache on myself doesn't make me Mexican. But Sheriff of YouTube, who I have not seen for a while, says this is what happens when Trantifa teams up with Furby sexual dysfunction. And this is something I want to avoid on my channel. And it's hard. It's hard. I don't want a straw man. I don't want to engage in ad hominem attacks. And I don't want to diminish the humanity of those who hold a viewpoint that disagrees with my own. But that's hard. It's hard. It's hard for them. It's hard for me. It's hard for both of us. And I've seen in the wake of Charlie Kirk's assassination, I have seen some wonderful examples where he's gotten into very thoughtful, meaningful, loving dialogues with individuals who approached him. And they would be people who were either open to hearing what he had to say or already in agreement with what he had to say. But I probably think more often than not, the individuals who were anxious to get on a mic and stand in front of him and argue with him were those who were vehemently opposed to his thoughts, and it would be a slugfest, and they would go at each other. And it's hard to be loving and conciliatory and recognize the humanity of someone who's looking to take your block off in a verbal exchange. And the tendency is to give back as good as you get. And I think Charlie Kirk did give back as good as he got. You know, this whole notion when he was actually the guy who was questioning Charlie Kirk, who was at the microphone when he was shot, has actually gone public. And they were talking about the number of trans individuals or gender confused individuals involved in shootings. And from what I understand, I don't know, I don't have the data. That's where Charlie Kirk was so amazing. He would have the statistics, he would remember them. But of course, you got to remember statistics, every side can use them to their advantage. There's a famous book called Lying with Statistics and how you can, warp things to present an argument. And it's all in the presentation. And it's all about the methodology and everything. You can play with statistics so easily and to push a narrative. But at any rate, the exchange was over how many trans individuals have been involved in mass shootings in America. And Charlie Kirk, too many, puts the mic down. And the whole point where I know exactly where the discussion was going. And yeah, there are a lot of shootings in the United States. And yes, the number of trans individuals, gender confused, who are engaged are a small percentage of all the shootings that take place. However, it's grossly disproportionate to the population of gender confused individuals in the population. If you talk about men who identify as women, you're probably talking 0.0001% of the American population. So they should be responsible for 0.0001% of the mass shootings, but it's exponentially higher. They're overrepresented. And anyway, let's see what else is being said. Whale is writing, I attended many anti-COVID measure marches, walked my sock off. I didn't go to many myself. I went to Henry Hildebrandt's church in Aylmer, Ontario, where we were gathering in the hundreds and thousands. I think a couple times got over 1,000. And there was a worship service and rally held at Nathan Phillips Square in Toronto that I went to. There was one up in Peterborough that I went to. And there was one in Coburg where we marched in front of City Hall. And those were all of them. I know that a lot of individuals were engaged in them every week. They're going down to Queen's Park or wherever, and they were every single week. To be honest, I'm not a big fan of protests. I find they attract a lot of what I call the lunatic fringe. And then the game of guilt by association gets played. Emi's writing that journalists are bound by a code of ethics, pundits are not. But journalists ignore their code of ethics all the time. I've cited the two prominent examples during the COVID era here many times about the CBC putting up the image of a mannequin hooked up to a ventilator, and the way they reported on the death of a 14-year-old who died because of stage 4 inoperable terminal brain cancer, and they tried to blame his death on COVID. And the journalists just threw their ethics right out the window. And then later, what they do is they say, well, we made a mistake in that it was an error in judgment. And it's no way. BS. No mistake, no error. You were engaging in blatant propaganda and you got caught. And so now you're just sorry that you got caught. Oh, we made a mistake. We got caught. It was an error in judgment. We should have done things a little more sneakily so we wouldn't get caught. And there are plenty of other examples. Lots going on. Sheriff is writing that he's XXX, like the bottle. Okay. Sheriff is a bit of a smart ass, certain type of disturber, and that's okay. Uh, he's saying hats off to you for going to all those protests, and you're welcome for the service. Eat me. Whale is saying my friend was walking into our uh, my friend was walking into our local hospital's video recording to disclose that they were empty. Only security people were around. Lots say I saw some of those videos. I have a very good friend, Steve, buddy of mine from the age of 12. And he'd had arthroscopic knee surgery done and had developed a post-operative infection up in Vaughan, Ontario, north of Toronto, around Maple, up where Canada's Wonderland is. So highly populated area, a place where, during flu season, the hospital would be overflowing. And he went in he developed this infection, so he had to go into the hospital. And he said it was completely empty, that they took him in 5-10 minutes to check him in. Doctor came, saw him right away. He was in and out in less than an hour. He said it was unbelievable that the hospital was a morgue, and that there was no one there. It was completely vacant aside from the staff. I guess I don't know if they were doing TikTok videos or not, but and uh, there's a global pandemic going on, and proof of that is hospitals are empty. Crazy. Crazy, but that's wasn't on the nightly news. What you saw on the nightly news was a field hospital being set up in Central Park in New York City. Oh my God, they're setting up a field hospital. Oh, people got scared. Drive fear. Eat me saying to Whale Oil, saw those videos, just another proof that the media were lying about hospitals being full. Normally during flu season, which October, sometime late September, October, somewhere around there, and flu season runs until March, April. During that time of the year, hospitals, if you read the reporting from 2017 to 2018, 2019, hospitals were bursting at the seams. Normally, that's normal. That's to be expected. Hospitals are bursting at the seams, 170, 80% capacity. We haven't got a single bed. People are being treated in chairs in the waiting room because there's nowhere to put them. This is the reporting that was happening before COVID came along. And it's because we're an aging population. The baby boomers now are coming into their 80s. And as people get into their 70s and 80s and up, they start to need healthcare services more and more, and nothing was done to increase capacity in the healthcare system. So now they have what demographers, those who study demographics, call the pig and the python. This massive baby boom population is now moving. They're heading into nursing homes and hospitals, and the capacity was never built. And there have been voices in academia and politics and other places warning that we have to do something. When the boomers start to age, they're going to overwhelm the healthcare system. And Amy is asking, Sheriff, wondering if I know about Furbies. I do. There are people who identify as cats and things of that nature, and they dress up. I genuinely think the pervasiveness of it is overblown. Now the transgender stuff, like I said, I've worked just in the last couple of years. I've worked with two individuals suffering from gender confusion. 10 plus years ago, I knew a guy, same thing. I even served in the army with a guy. He was with me here in Trenton, worked in the same unit, and I didn't know he was gender confused, but then he got posted out of Trenton, sent to Valcartier, and when he got to Valcartier, he went the full Monty. He did the full transition, as far as I know. I think he had the surgery and everything. We used to be friends on Facebook, but he was friends on my old profile. I don't know if he's friends on my new one. I don't think so. I do know about Furbies, and I think these store. We get into the game of telephone, and I think I've asked the kids who go to the local high school here if they know of any kids who are like this, and they say it's a role playing thing. That there are individuals who are into role playing games, anime, and stuff like that. But that there's no one in this school, which has a population ENSS. It's the name of the high school in my town, East Northumberland Secondary School, ENSS. And I haven't heard. I've asked, and there are no litter boxes in the classroom. That's I think that's oh now does that mean it doesn't exist anywhere? Not going to say that. I'm not going to say that it's completely a total fabrication, but I think it's been blown up into something far bigger, much bigger than what it actually is. So let's see. Whale is saying that to eat me that they had news people doing TV updates near the hospitals while the parade sirens were sounding, deceiving the population. Wouldn't surprise me at all if they're going to put a mannequin. If they're going to show a picture of a mannequin on a ventilator, what else won't they do? If they're going to take a kid dying of cancer and try and blame it on COVID to scare people, what else won't they do? Sheriff Furby militants are on the rise. Yeah. And then Eat Me saying, I bet that it's MK Ultra at work big time. I forget what MK Ultra is, some type of psychological operation or something like that. And I forget exactly what it involves, but Sheriff is saying, I wore my welding helmet as a mask when I went to Walmart. I'm not that smart. I wore a mingle mask. I wore this little piece of plastic, like a regular mask, but just sat off a little chin rest on it, a little piece of plastic covering my nose and mouth. Drove some people crazy, but I think because I'm old, I'm no meat hook. I'm no massive guy, but I'm 6 foot tall. I'm like 210, 215, somewhere around there. I'm a decently big guy. And I think, the bald head and quite often a goat, you know, mustache and goatee, that I can be maybe a little intimidating looking. And so no one ever, but I did get stink eye. But if I caught anyone not wearing anything, not a mingle mask or anything, I'd go up and shake their hands. And that got stink eye. And Amy is saying wrong. It was CTV and they retracted and apologized. The second only repeated what Dina Hinshaw states as a COVID death. Yeah. Well, they were all there at the press conference when Dina Hinshaw announced that Alberta had just experienced its youngest ever COVID death. And this is October of 2021. CTV, CBC, Global, they were all there. And she did make mention of the fact that while the child did have some underlying health issues, it was a COVID death. And the press, rather than doing their job and pressing her and saying what specifically were the underlying health conditions, like an ethical journalist would do, instead, the reporters there said, why are you mentioning the child's underlying health issues, no matter how big or small they are? Doesn't that just take away from the message that people need to be afraid of COVID and that they need to approach this seriously? Why are you even mentioning that? It was like my head's blowing up. I don't know whether it was CTV, CBC, or Global, but they were all there. And none of them did any investigating into this child's condition. And then when the child's two sisters went to the mainstream media, CTV, Global, CBC, they ignored them. They said we're not reporting on that. And so it wasn't until the Western Standard, an uh, alternative media outlet, ran their story up a high flagpole, that's when the story finally came out, because everyone online, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Reddit, you name it, everyone's sharing this out far and wide, and everyone knows the government's lying. And then Dina Hinshaw was forced to issue an apology, and she said, we made a mistake. It was an error in judgment. Same as when CTV or CBC Edmonton had done the newscast with showing a mannequin on a ventilator. Same language. Well, it was a mistake, an error in judgment. Full roar. And yeah, they tried to blame, his name was Nathaniel, either Spitzer or Spitzer, Spitzer. If Doubloon is still here from New Jersey, in Canada, the last letter of the alphabet is Z. In American, it's Z. Well, anyway, Dina Hinshaw was Alberta's top doc. Bonnie Henry, ours in BC. Yeah. One of my favorite, and it's forgotten about, there was a woman named Barbara Jaffe or Yaffe, and she was the Associate Chief Medical Officer of Health in Ontario. She reported to Dr. David Williams, who was the Chief Medical Officer of Health. And Barbara Jaffe was at a press conference with Doug Ford, and Doug Ford was asked the question, why don't we test teachers and such proactively so that we can get in front of things? And Doug said, as he often did, well, I'm going to defer to the experts. Dr. Jaffe, would you come back up here? So she came up and she fielded the question, and she said, if we test someone today, we only know if they're positive today. It's that old moment in time argument that we heard so often. Then she said, but if you're testing in an area with very little COVID, you're going to get false positives more than half the time. You're going to get false positives more than half the time, or words very close to that. Many will probably remember what she said. I shared it out like crazy because you could find it on YouTube back then. I forget exactly when this was, but they were standing outside and doing this press conference, all doing that stupid non-scientifically based 6-foot distancing garbage. And Dr. Barbara Jaffe, and then later she did a press conference with Dr. David Williams, and they sat down. They both had big reams of paper, and they got caught in a hot mic, a live mic. Didn't know it was live, and he said something to, or she said, or he said, I don't know why I bring all these papers. I don't even read them. And then he said, yeah, I just say whatever they put in front of me. All these papers there were just there as a prop. Oh, look at all the reading that guy must do. Yeah, he doesn't even read it. He admitted it on a live mic. I don't even read this stuff. I just say whatever they put in front of me. We've got Eat Me saying, Furbies are free sexual movement who just dress up to fornicate. Okay. I think it goes further than that too. Like the narrative is that kids go to school and they want a litter box put out and et cetera, which I think is maybe it's happened once or twice, but it's like been blown up. And that's the problem that we have in today's world, is that people hear something that confirms their bias and they want it to be bigger. And anything they can find that substantiates their view, they amplify it. When, they make mountains out of molehills. And that's both sides. Sheriff is writing, oh boy, Gordon has had overexposure on the underbelly of the internet. YouTube pony boys. No, I haven't. YouTube pony. I haven't even ever heard that term. And please, that's something I don't even want to look at. And then he goes on to say, whenever I say a joke, Gordon thinks I'm a smarty pants. Yeah, no, I know you're a smart ass, but it's tough being in smart ass mode all the time. I think MK is mankind, ultra control, I think. Okay. And Eat Me is saying that the hot mic moment was priceless. I think that's in reference to Dr. David Williams, Dr. Barbara Jaffe sitting in front of a table and saying, I don't even know why I bring all these papers. I don't even read them. I just say whatever they put in front of me, whatever comes across teleprompter. And I'm an actor. Yeah. And then Dr. David Williams was replaced by Dr. Kieran Moore. And he gave a press conference, was reading from a teleprompter. He even told you that. He said, sorry, I'm having a bit of problem with the teleprompter here. It's going too fast, or I can't get the speed to work properly. Okay, there, I got it working now. And he read this statement off the teleprompter. And he was strongly urging, advising, people to mask up when in indoor congregate settings where 6 foot distancing wasn't possible. And that, it wasn't a mandate, but we're strongly urging, strongly advising. And then within a week or so, less than 2 weeks later, he was at an event in downtown Toronto in Queens Quay. They were having a big gala event put on by a Toronto magazine celebrating the 50 most influential people in Toronto or Ontario. And he was one of them. He was one of them, and they were in this indoor setting, having a big gala event with a dinner and drinking and dancing and the whole bit. And there's video and pictures of him there, rubbing elbows with everyone, very close together, and nobody wearing a mask. Nobody. And yet now here it is, 2025, and you still see people going to the drugstore, grocery store, bank, library, still wearing a mask, still with that COVID fear eyes, who think that we're all, they think they're so smart, that everyone is so dumb, that if everyone would put on a diaper on their face like them, this germ magnet, if everyone would wear a petri dish, there'd be no more disease in the world. But no, not everyone is as smart as me. Uh, and Whale is saying that the TV watchers are in the majority. I don't know about that. I just think they're the most vocal minority. The number of people who watch the nightly news in Canada, I did a checking a while ago, more than a year ago, and I think we're talking about 3-4 million people who are regular viewers of a nightly newscast like CBC, CTV, or Global. There's only about 3-4 million who watch it regularly. However, they are convinced that they're informed and everyone else is not. And so they're very bold. They're very bold. They're very confident in making their proclamations. Well, I know because I watch the news. And if you were smart, you would wear a mask because I watch TV and they told me that. And the TV knows. And you don't watch TV. If you were like me and you watch CBC Nightly News, Global's The National, if you watched, you would know, but you're ignorant. You're not as smart as me. I know how to do what I'm told. I know how to regurgitate things back. So, at any rate, we've gone on for over an hour and a half. Thank you for watching. Again, this was Act One, a Canadian take on news events. The next one I do will not be on the StreamYard platform. Next time I go live will be just on the regular YouTube. I'll try that super chat things again without StreamYard. I think it'll work over there. And see, I've been thinking that maybe I need to improve my game a little bit. Maybe I do need to do some things to improve the production values, but unfortunately that takes money. So maybe I can do some things to increase. We'll see. We'll see. Um, anyway, I'm just I'm gonna end with a blessing, but before I do, I'll read the last few messages. So what's Nancy saying? All I remember, the full masking mandate happening in Quebec is the first one was the mayor of Côte Saint-Luc implemented it first. Then it was the mayor of Montreal, and soon after the premier. Yeah, the dominoes falling in Ontario here in April, May, June, July. It was a lot of people were wearing them, but it wasn't mandatory. And there was sometime around August that they made it a mandate. I remember I was in Pickering for whatever reason. I can't remember why. And I went into a gas station. And at that time, at the first, I bought one of those cheesy neck gaiters. That was the material so thin, flimsy, you could see through the thing. It was like a Halloween mask type thing. It had a gory face on it. And so I just wear it around my neck and there, go and pay for my gas and pull it down. And some guy walked in, you have to have a mask. And it's like, you think mine really does anything? Gosh, the holes in it. And if anything, if these droplets are so dangerous, all they're doing is being multiplied by the fabric, the cheesy garbage fabric. But I called it passive aggressive compliance. You want me to wear something on my face? Fine, I'll wear something obviously useless. And even later, I found the Mingle mask, which was even better because it was just a stupid little piece of plastic held on like regular mask, just in front of the nose and mouth, a little piece of flimsy plexiglass or flimsy plastic, flexible plastic. Oh, you want? I'll do it. And then the famous quote that originally attributed to Mark Twain, famously said again on the red carpet at the Oscars by Denzel Washington. If you don't read the newspaper, you're using the Mark Twain. If you don't read the newspaper, you are uninformed. And if you read the newspaper, you are misinformed. Yeah, love that. Anyway, and the masks were made mandatory in Quebec. They were also made mandatory in Ontario. I think they were made mandatory pretty much all over Canada. It's hard to determine who had it the worst. I mean, New Brunswick at one point, for a period, they banned the unvaccinated from being allowed into the grocery store. That was horrible. In Quebec, they famously had their couvre-feu, their curfew, and 8, 9 p.m. I think it was from 8 p.m. until 5, 6 in the morning. You were not allowed to be out on the streets. Manitoba started with this, you can't buy those items, they're non-essential. But then that spread to Ontario as well. I think it was, it's like they were trying different things, trying to see how far they could push it before people said, this is stupid. This is stupid. A marijuana dispensary is essential, but supports for people with mental health challenges, oh, we can let that go. But you can get your weed and you can get your booze and cigarettes, the manufacture, sale, distribution, and retailing of cigarettes. Well, that's essential. We can't stop that. But that single mother working at a restaurant trying to put food on the table for her kid. Oh, well, that's not essential. Yeah, but the motion picture industry and stream, Netflix, they're allowed to keep operating. This hour is 22 minutes. You guys can keep doing your show, and you don't even have to wear a mask. It was crazy. Eat me saying we were banned from Walmart, not grocery stores, and Costco too. Well, the big boys got richer, and they wiped out so many small entrepreneurs, especially the restaurant industry. Restaurants closed massively, and they'll never open again. Whale saying good night. Was another stimulating conversation with everyone here. Yeah, eat me, Whale. You're part of that. We had new guy Doubloon. I hope we see him back. Just scrolling through, yeah, 4 doubloons. My other's keeper came in from Saskatchewan. Darnell was here from the great province of Alberta. It's a good representation tonight. Thank you for watching. If you got to the end and you can hit the like button, it's appreciated. Likewise, if you're not subscribed, love to have you subscribe so that you'll know when my lives are happening. And I'll end off the way I like to. May the Lord bless and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you. And may the Lord grant you peace. And even in these crazy times, the offer is always there. And if you're looking to navigate these crazy times, there's no better way to navigate it than by getting into a relationship with the maker of all things. So I'll leave it there. Have a good night, and we'll see you in a night or two. God bless.